The bullet tore through Jacob Foster's chest, just as the sun climbed over the Dakota plains, and with his last rattling breath, he made Brock Coleman promise something that would change both their lives forever. "My wife," Jacob gasped, blood bubbling at his lips as Brock pressed his hands desperately against the wound. "Naomi, you have to take care of her, promise me." "You are going to be fine," Brock said, though he knew better. They both did. The bank robbers had gotten away, but not before putting a bullet in Jacob, the sheriff's deputy who had tried to stop them. "Just hold on. No time." Jacob's fingers clutched at Brock's shirt with surprising strength. "Marry her. She cannot run the ranch alone. No family. Please, Brock. You are the only man I trust." Brock's throat tightened. He had known Jacob since childhood, had stood beside him at his wedding 3 years ago to beautiful Naomi Fletcher. "Jacob, I cannot just promise me." Jacob's eyes blazed with desperate urgency. "Swear it on your father's grave." "Marry her, protect her." The words caught in Brock's throat, but looking into his oldest friend's dying eyes, he could not refuse. "I swear it, I will marry her, I will protect her." Jacob's grip loosened, and something like peace settled over his blood-streaked face. "Thank you, brother." His eyes glazed over, and Brock felt the life leave his friend's body. That had been 3 weeks ago, and now Brock stood on the porch of the Foster Ranch 5 miles outside White River, South Dakota, wondering how in God's name he was going to honor that promise. The August heat shimmered off the grasslands, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed mournfully. The door opened before he could knock, and there stood Naomi Foster, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her green eyes rimmed with red from crying. She wore black mourning clothes that hung a bit loose on her frame as if grief had stolen her appetite. She was 24, Brock knew, 2 years younger than himself. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "I wondered if you would come. May I come in, Mrs. Foster? We need to talk." She stepped aside, and Brock removed his hat as he entered the modest ranch house. It was neat and well kept, smelling of bread and herbs. A rifle hung over the mantel alongside a portrait of Jacob in his deputy's uniform. "I know why you are here," Naomi said, clasping her hands in front of her. "Jacob told me what he would ask of you if anything ever happened to him." Brock blinked in surprise. "He did. He knew his job was dangerous. We talked about it." Her voice remained steady, but Brock could see the grief carved into every line of her face. "I told him it was an absurd plan, that no man should be bound by such a promise. But Jacob insisted. He said you were the most honorable man he knew, and if anyone would keep such a vow, it would be you." "I gave him my word," Brock said simply. Naomi moved to the window, looking out at the land Jacob had worked so hard to build. "The ranch has 40 head of cattle, 15 horses, and 200 acres. I have exactly $37 in savings. The bank payment is due in 2 months, and I do not have enough to cover it." She turned to face him, her chin lifted with pride despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I am a good cook, a hard worker, and I know how to run a ranch. What I cannot do is rope cattle, break horses, or fight off claim jumpers alone. Jacob was right about that much." "Then we are agreed," Brock said, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "When would you like to have the ceremony? You truly mean to go through with it?" Naomi's composure cracked slightly. "Mr. Coleman, you do not have to sacrifice your life for a dying man's wish." "I could sell the ranch, move to Rapid City, find work as a seamstress or a teacher, and give up everything Jacob built, everything he wanted for you." Brock shook his head. "I made a promise to my best friend. More than that, it is the right thing to do. You need help and I can provide it." "That is all there is to it." "That is not all there is to it, and you know it." Naomi's voice rose slightly. "Marriage is supposed to be about love, about building a life together because you want to, not because of obligation. My parents' marriage was arranged by their families, Brock said quietly. They learned to love each other over time. Maybe we can do the same. Naomi was silent for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Very well. Saturday, then. Reverend Patterson can perform the ceremony. It will be small, practical, just witnesses and the necessary words. Saturday it is. Brock turned his hat in his hands. I will bring my things over on Friday. I have some money saved. It should help with the bank payment. I will not take your charity. It will not be charity. We will be married. What is mine will be yours, and what is yours will be mine. That is how this works. For the first time, something that might have been a smile flickered across Naomi's face. Jacob said you were stubborn as a mule. He should talk. I remember the time he refused to come down from that tree for 6 hours because I said he could not climb it. He told me about that. Said you eventually climbed up and sat with him until he was ready to come down. Seemed like the thing to do. Naomi's expression softened slightly. You were a good friend to him, Mr. Coleman. I am grateful for that at least. Brock, if we are to be married, you should call me Brock. Brock then, and you should call me Naomi. He nodded and settled his hat back on his head. I will see you Saturday, Naomi. As he rode back to his small cabin on the outskirts of White River, Brock tried to process what he had just committed himself to. He had never thought much about marriage, had never courted anyone seriously. His life had been dedicated to his horses and his work as a ranch hand on the Turner spread. Now, in the space of 3 weeks, he was about to become a husband and a rancher. More than that, he was about to marry his dead best friend's widow. Saturday arrived with a cloudless sky and oppressive heat. Brock stood at the front of the small white church in his best suit, which he had worn exactly twice before, once to his father's funeral and once to Jacob and Naomi's wedding. The irony was not lost on him. Reverend Patterson, a kind-faced man in his 50s, stood ready with his Bible. The only other people present were Martha and Henry Dalton, who owned the general store and served as witnesses. They had known both Jacob and Naomi well. The church door opened, and Naomi entered. She wore a simple gray dress, appropriate for a widow, with her dark hair still pulled back severely. She carried no flowers, wore no veil. This was not a celebration, Brock realized. It was a transaction, a necessary arrangement. She walked down the aisle alone, her footsteps echoing in the empty church. When she reached his side, she gave him a small nod. Her face was composed, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers trembled slightly. Reverend Patterson cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join Brock Coleman and Naomi Foster in holy matrimony. He paused, as if giving them one last chance to change their minds. When neither spoke, he continued. Do you, Brock Coleman, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do, Brock said firmly. And do you, Naomi Foster, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Naomi's voice was barely above a whisper. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Dakota, I pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Patterson looked at Brock expectantly. You may kiss your bride. Brock hesitated, then leaned forward and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to Naomi's cheek. She stiffened slightly but did not pull away. Martha Dalton dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief as they signed the marriage certificate. I know this is not the happiest of circumstances, she said, embracing Naomi, but I am glad you will not be alone, dear. Thank you, Martha, Naomi said softly. Henry shook Brock's hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm for a man who spent his days weighing flour and sugar. "You are a good man, Coleman." Jacob knew what he was doing. They declined Martha's offer of a wedding supper and returned to the ranch separately. Brock on his horse with his belongings in saddlebags, Naomi in the wagon she had driven to town. As Brock approached the ranch house, he felt like he was entering foreign territory, even though he had visited dozens of times when Jacob was alive. Everything was different now. This was his home. Naomi was his wife. Inside, Naomi had already changed out of her gray dress into a practical cotton work dress. She stood in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot on the stove. "I made stew," she said without turning around. "I figured you would be hungry after the ride." "Thank you." Brock set his saddlebags down. "Where should I put my things?" Naomi's stirring paused for just a fraction of a second. "There is a spare room at the end of the hall. You can sleep there. I will stay in the main bedroom." Relief and something else, something he could not quite identify, washed over Brock. "That is fine." They ate dinner in near silence, the clink of spoons against bowls the only sound. The stew was good, rich and hearty, but Brock barely tasted it. The weight of the day, of the strange new reality they found themselves in, pressed down on both of them. "I was thinking," Naomi said finally, "that tomorrow we should ride out and check the north pasture. Jacob said there was a fence that needed mending." "All right, I can handle that." "I will help. I know which fence he meant." Brock looked up at her. "You do not have to. I told you I am not useless. I know this ranch. Jacob taught me." Her green eyes flashed with something fierce. "I will not sit in the house doing needlework while you do all the work." "We are partners in this, are we not?" "We are," Brock agreed, surprised by the strength in her voice. "Partners." That night, lying in the small spare bedroom that smelled of cedar and dust, Brock stared at the ceiling and wondered what he had gotten himself into. Down the hall, Naomi lay in her own bed, probably thinking the same thing. They were married, bound together by law and by his promise to a dying man, but they were strangers in every way that mattered. He thought of Jacob, of the boy who had shared his lunch when Brock's family had nothing, who had stood up to the bullies who mocked Brock's patched clothes, who had been more brother than friend. Jacob had trusted him with his most precious treasure, and Brock would not fail him. Even if he had no idea how to be a husband to a woman who was still in love with someone else, the days fell into a rhythm. They woke before dawn, ate breakfast in the kitchen as the sun rose, then spent the day working the ranch. Naomi proved to be as capable as she had claimed, able to ride and rope nearly as well as any man. She knew every inch of the property, every quirk of every animal. Brock found himself relying on her knowledge more than he had expected. They spoke little beyond what was necessary for the work. At night, they ate dinner together, cleaned up in careful silence, then retreated to their separate bedrooms. It was a lonely existence, but Brock told himself it was better than the alternative. Better than watching Naomi lose everything Jacob had built. 2 weeks after the wedding, Brock was in the barn repairing a saddle when he heard raised voices from the direction of the house. He dropped his tools and ran, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his hip. 3 men on horseback had surrounded Naomi in the yard. Brock recognized them immediately. The Garrett brothers, a trio of troublemakers who had been run out of White River twice for fighting and theft. The oldest, Wade Garrett, was leaning down from his horse, his face twisted in an ugly grin. "Come on, sweetheart," Wade was saying. "A pretty little widow like you, all alone out here. You need a real man to take care of you." "I am not alone," Naomi said coldly, though Brock could see the fear in her rigid posture. "And I am not interested. Leave my property." "Your property," Wade laughed. A woman cannot run a ranch by herself. Why do not you sell it to us? We will give you a fair price. Get off my land." Naomi's hand moved toward the rifle leaning against the porch rail. Wade's grin vanished. "Now, that is not very friendly," she said to leave. Brock's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He walked forward slowly, his hand resting on his gun. "You boys should listen." The three brothers turned to look at him. Wade's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Brock Coleman, Naomi's husband." "Husband?" Wade looked between them, his expression skeptical. "I heard Jacob Foster died. When did you go and get married?" 2 weeks ago. Now I will ask you once more, get off our land." The middle brother Silas spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "We are just being neighborly." "No, you are trespassing. If you are not gone in the next 30 seconds, I will make you leave." Wade studied Brock for a long moment, clearly trying to decide if he was serious. Something he saw in Brock's face must have convinced him, because he finally jerked his horse's reins. "Fine, we are going. But this land should belong to someone who knows what to do with it." "It does," Brock said flatly. The Garrett brothers rode off, kicking up dust as they went. Brock watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to Naomi. She had gone pale, her hands trembling. "Are you all right?" "Yes, thank you. They have been sniffing around for the past week, making offers on the land. Today was the first time they came all the way to the house." She wrapped her arms around herself. Jacob always said they were dangerous. He was right. "If they come back, you get inside and bar the door. Understand?" Naomi bristled. "I can defend myself." "I know you can, but 3 against 1 is bad odds for anyone." Brock's voice softened. "I promised Jacob I would protect you. Let me do that." Something shifted in Naomi's expression. For the first time since the wedding, she looked at him not as an obligation or a stranger, but as someone who might actually care about her well-being. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you, Brock." That night at dinner, Naomi was less silent than usual. She told him about the Garrett brothers' history in the area, about the rumors that they had rustled cattle from neighboring ranches. Brock listened, filing away the information. When she finished, he found himself telling her about his own past, about growing up poor, about learning to ride and rope from an old Mexican vaquero named Carlos. "Jacob mentioned Carlos once," Naomi said. "He said Carlos taught you both everything you know about horses." "He did. Best horseman I ever met. He died 5 years ago, but I still use the techniques he showed me." Jacob loved horses. Naomi's eyes grew distant. "He always said that if we ever had children, he would teach them to ride before they could walk." The mention of children hung in the air between them, awkward and heavy. Brock cleared his throat. "I am sorry you lost him, Naomi. I know this arrangement is not what you would have chosen." "No, it is not." She met his eyes directly, "but I am grateful nonetheless. I do not think I could have managed alone. You are stronger than you think, maybe, but strength does not pay the bank or fight off claim jumpers." She stood and began collecting the dishes. "Jacob chose well when he asked you. I want you to know that I see that, even if this is difficult." It was the most honest conversation they had had since the wedding, and it cracked something open in Brock's chest. He wanted to say more, to ask her about her life before Jacob, about her hopes and fears, but the moment passed. Naomi retreated to the kitchen, and the wall between them went back up. But it was a start. The following weeks brought the hard work of late summer on a ranch. They cut hay, mended more fences, and branded the new calves. Brock sold 3 horses to a cavalry buyer passing through, bringing in much-needed cash. Together, they rode into White River to make the bank payment, delivering it with a full day to spare. The banker, a thin man named Cornelius Weeks, looked surprised to see them together. "Mr. Coleman, Mrs. Foster, I was not expecting you." "It is Mrs." Coleman now, Naomi said firmly, placing the payment on his desk. We were married last month. Weeks's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline, but he counted the money and marked the ledger without comment. Very good. Next payment is due in 3 months. Outside the bank, Naomi surprised Brock by linking her arm through his. Let them talk, she said quietly when he looked at her questioningly. The whole town is going to know by evening anyway. Might as well give them something to see. They walked through White River like that, arm in arm, and Brock was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. He knew what people were thinking, that the marriage was too soon after Jacob's death, that it was improper and strange. But Naomi held her head high, and Brock found himself admiring her courage. At the general store, Martha Dalton greeted them warmly. How are you two settling in? Well enough, Naomi said. We needed some supplies. Flour, sugar, coffee. As Martha gathered their order, Henry approached Brock. Word of advice, he said quietly. Keep an eye out. The Garretts have been spreading rumors that your marriage is not legitimate, that you are just trying to steal Jacob's land. Brock's jaw tightened. Let them talk. I intend to, but you should know that some people are listening. Might be worth having the Reverend confirm things if it comes to that. I appreciate the warning. On the ride back to the ranch, Naomi was quiet. Finally, she said, Do you regret it, marrying me? No, Brock answered honestly. Do you regret accepting? I do not know. She stared at the horizon. I miss Jacob so much it feels like I cannot breathe sometimes, but I also know he was right. I needed help. You have been good to me, Brock. Better than I probably deserve, given how cold I have been. You are grieving, I understand that. It has been 2 months since he died. People expect me to move on. People do not get to decide when you are done grieving. Brock kept his eyes on the road. Take all the time you need. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. You really are as good as Jacob said. That night after dinner, Naomi did not immediately retreat to her room. Instead, she sat in the rocking chair by the fireplace, mending one of Brock's shirts that had torn on a fence nail. Brock settled in the other chair with the ranch ledger, updating their accounts. We might be able to afford another breeding bull next spring, he said, doing the calculations, if we sell off some of the older cattle this fall. Jacob wanted to improve the herd, Naomi said. He had his eye on some Herefords from a ranch near Rapid City. I know. He told me about it last year. Brock glanced at her. We could take a trip up there if you want, see if they still have any for sale. That would be good. She nodded off the thread and examined her work. There. Good as new. You did not have to do that. I know. But we are partners, remember? You work the ranch, I keep the house and help where I can. That is how this works. Is that how you see it? A business arrangement, Naomi set down the mending. I do not know how else to see it, Brock. What are we supposed to be to each other? It was a fair question, and Brock did not have a good answer. Friends, maybe, companions. Friends, Naomi repeated softly. I would like that. I think Jacob would have liked that too. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound. It was the most peaceful evening they had spent together, and when Naomi finally stood to go to bed, she paused by Brock's chair. Good night, Brock. Good night, Naomi. Her hand briefly touched his shoulder, a fleeting gesture that was gone almost before it registered. But Brock felt it long after she had disappeared down the hallway. September brought cooler weather and the hard work of preparing for winter. They repaired the barn roof, stocked the woodshed, and drove a dozen cattle to market in White River. The money from the sale would help them through the lean months ahead. Brock found himself watching Naomi more than he probably should. He noticed the way she laughed when one of the horses nuzzled her for treats, the way she hummed while cooking, the way the afternoon sun caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair. She was beautiful, he realized, though he felt guilty for thinking it. She was his wife in name only, still mourning the husband she had truly loved. One evening in late September, a storm rolled across the plains. Thunder shook the house, and lightning split the sky. Brock was checking the windows to make sure they were secure when he heard a small sound from the hallway. Naomi stood in the doorway of her bedroom, her arms wrapped around herself. Even in the dim light, he could see she was trembling. "Are you all right?" "I hate storms," she admitted. "Jacob always used to sit with me during the bad ones. Foolish, I know, but I cannot help it." "It is not foolish." Brock hesitated, then said, "I could sit with you if you want." She nodded gratefully, and they settled in the front room, Naomi curled in the rocking chair with a blanket, Brock in the chair opposite. The storm raged outside, but inside the house felt safe and warm. "Tell me something about yourself," Naomi said. "Something I do not know." "Like what?" "Anything. I realized today that we have been married for over a month and I barely know you." Brock thought for a moment. "When I was 12, I decided I wanted to be a pastor." Naomi's eyes widened. "Really, really? I thought I heard God calling me." "Spent 6 months reading the Bible every night, practicing sermons on the chickens." He smiled at the memory. "Then one Sunday, Reverend Patterson asked if I wanted to help with the service. I got up in front of the whole congregation and could not get a single word out. Just stood there, silent as a stone, until my mother had to come get me." "What happened?" "Carlos found me hiding in his barn afterward. He told me that some men are called to preach with words and some are called to preach with their actions. He said the world needed both." Brock shrugged. "I never tried to be a pastor again, but I have tried to live the way Carlos said. Let my actions speak." "They do," Naomi said softly. "You are one of the best men I have ever known, Brock Coleman. Jacob saw that. I am starting to see it too. Tell me something about you now." Naomi pulled the blanket tighter. "Before I married Jacob, I wanted to be a teacher. I love books, love learning. My mother taught me to read when I was 4, and I have been reading everything I can get my hands on ever since." "Why did you not become a teacher?" "My parents died when I was 19. Cholera. I had no money, no family. Jacob was working as a ranch hand on my father's spread. He offered to marry me to take care of me." She stared into the fire. "I know people thought I married him for security, but it was not like that. He was kind and good, and I grew to love him very much. He loved you too. He talked about you all the time." "Did he?" Naomi's voice caught. "What did he say?" "He said you were the smartest person he ever met. He said you made him want to be better, to build something worth having. He said that marrying you was the best decision he ever made." Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. "I miss him so much." Brock moved without thinking, crossing to her chair and kneeling beside it. "I know you do. I feel like I am betraying him," she whispered. "Being here with you, starting to feel like maybe this life is not so terrible. Is that awful?" "No. Jacob wanted you to be happy. That is why he made me promise." Brock took her hand carefully. "He knew you deserved to have a good life, even if he could not be part of it." Naomi looked down at their joined hands. "You are a good man, Brock. I am trying to be." The storm passed, and eventually Naomi fell asleep in the chair, the blanket tucked around her. Brock carefully lifted her and carried her to her bedroom, laying her gently on the bed and pulling a quilt over her. She murmured something in her sleep, but did not wake. As he stood looking down at her, Brock realized with a jolt that something had changed. Somewhere in the past weeks, Naomi had stopped being just his dead friend's widow, his wife in name only. She had become someone he cared about, someone he looked forward to seeing every morning, someone whose smile could brighten his whole day. He was falling in love with her. The realization terrified him. She was still grieving Jacob, still wore her wedding ring from her first marriage alongside the simple band he had given her. How could he tell her what he was feeling without making everything worse? He could not. So he would do what he always did. Keep his promise, do the right thing, and hope that someday, maybe, she might feel something for him too. October arrived with frost on the grass and geese flying south in great V formations. Brock and Naomi worked side by side, preparing the ranch for winter. They moved the cattle to the lower pastures where there was more shelter from the wind. They winterized the barn and checked the feed supplies. One afternoon, as they were riding back from checking the fence line, they spotted smoke rising from the direction of the house. Brock's heart leaped into his throat. "Go!" he shouted, spurring his horse into a gallop. They arrived to find not the house on fire but a campfire in their yard. The Garrett brothers sat around it, bold as brass, roasting what looked like one of their chickens. Brock was off his horse before it had fully stopped, his hand on his gun. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" Wade Garrett stood slowly, grinning. "Just taking a rest on our way through. Nice chicken you have got here." "That is our chicken and this is our land. You are trespassing." "Your land," Silas spoke around a mouthful of meat. "We heard some interesting things in town. Folks saying this marriage of yours might not be legal. Something about you marrying her too soon after Jacob died, not observing the proper mourning period." "The law does not require a mourning period," Naomi said coldly, dismounting. "We are legally married and this is our land. Leave. Now." The youngest Garrett brother, Tom, stood up. He was the biggest of the three, broad-shouldered and mean-eyed. "Make us." Brock's hand moved to his gun, but before he could draw, Tom lunged at him. They went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling in the dirt. Brock heard Naomi scream, heard the sound of horses and shouts. Tom was strong, but Brock was faster. He got in 2 solid punches before Tom threw him off. They circled each other, fists raised. Tom charged again, but this time Brock was ready. He sidestepped and landed a hard right to Tom's jaw that sent the big man stumbling. Before Tom could recover, Brock had his gun drawn and pointed. "Do not move," Brock said, breathing hard. "Any of you." Wade had his own gun half drawn, but he froze when he saw Brock's weapon aimed at his brother. "Easy now, Coleman. Put your guns on the ground, slowly." The 3 brothers complied, though Wade's face was twisted with rage. "You are making a mistake. The mistake is yours. You came onto my property, stole my livestock, and attacked me. I would be within my rights to shoot all 3 of you." Brock's voice was deadly calm. "But I am going to give you one chance. Get on your horses and ride out of Dakota territory. If I ever see you near this ranch again, I will not hesitate." "You cannot run us out of the territory," Silas protested. "Watch me. I am riding into White River tomorrow to talk to the sheriff. By this time next week there will be warrants out for your arrest, trespassing, theft, assault. That is enough to get you 5 years hard labor. Your choice, leave now or wait for the law to find you." Wade stared at him for a long moment, then spat in the dirt. "This is not over." "Yes, it is. Get out." The Garrett brothers mounted their horses and rode off, leaving their stolen guns and the half-eaten chicken behind. Brock kept his weapon drawn until they disappeared from sight. "Brock, you are bleeding," Naomi said urgently. He looked down and saw that his shirt was torn and blood seeped from a cut on his ribs where Tom had gotten in a good hit. "It is not bad. Let me see." She was already unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers surprisingly steady. The cut was not deep, but it was long and would need cleaning. "Come inside." In the kitchen, Naomi heated water and gathered clean cloths. Brock sat shirtless at the table, watching as she carefully cleaned the wound. Her touch was gentle, professional, but he was intensely aware of her proximity, of the concentration on her face. "This might sting," she warned, dabbing the cut with whiskey. Brock hissed through his teeth but did not pull away. "You have done this before. Jacob came home with injuries more times than I can count. Went with the job." Her voice was sad. "I hated seeing him hurt. I am sorry. I should not have fought Tom. Do not be ridiculous. You defended our home." She began wrapping a bandage around his ribs. "You were very brave. I was very angry. There is a difference, maybe." She tied off the bandage and stepped back. "But you protected us. That takes courage." Their eyes met and something passed between them, something electric and undeniable. Naomi's breath caught, and for a moment Brock thought she might lean in, might close the distance between them. Instead, she turned away, busying herself with cleaning up the medical supplies. "You should rest. I will make supper." "Naomi, please." "Brock, not now." He wanted to push, to ask her what she was thinking, what she was feeling, but he respected her enough to let it go. "All right." That night, Brock lay in his small bedroom and stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment in the kitchen. He had seen something in Naomi's eyes, something that gave him hope. But he also knew that pushing her before she was ready would only drive her away. He would wait. He had promised to protect her, to give her the time she needed. If that meant waiting months or even years for her to see him as something more than an obligation, then that was what he would do, because somewhere along the way, his promise to Jacob had become about more than duty. It had become about love. The next morning, true to his word, Brock rode into White River and spoke to Sheriff Holcomb, a grizzled veteran of the Indian Wars who took his job seriously. Holcomb listened to Brock's account of the Garrett brothers' harassment, examined the stolen guns, and nodded grimly. "I have been waiting for an excuse to run those boys out of the county," Holcomb said. "They have been trouble since the day they arrived. I will draw up the warrants today. If they are smart, they will be halfway to Montana by now. And if they are not smart, then they will find out what the inside of my jail looks like." Holcomb leaned back in his chair. "How are you and Naomi doing, Coleman? I know people have been talking. We are doing fine. Better than fine, actually." "Good. Jacob was a good man. I am glad you are taking care of his widow." Holcomb studied him. "Seems to me like it is becoming more than just duty, though." Brock was not surprised that the old sheriff had picked up on his feelings. Holcomb had always been perceptive. "Is it that obvious? To someone who knows what to look for, does she know?" "No. She is still grieving Jacob. I do not want to complicate things." "Might be that complications are exactly what she needs," Holcomb said. "Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to keep on living." Brock considered that as he rode back to the ranch. When he arrived, he found Naomi in the barn brushing down one of the horses. She looked up as he entered, and there was something different in her expression, something softer. "Did you see the sheriff?" "I did. He is drawing up warrants. The Garretts should not bother us again." "Good." She went back to brushing, but her movements were distracted. Finally, she set the brush down and turned to face him. "I have been thinking about yesterday, about what almost happened in the kitchen." Brock's heart began to pound. "Naomi, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "When Jacob died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel anything again except grief and loneliness. But then you came, and you kept your promise, and you have been so good and patient and kind." Her voice trembled. "You make me feel things I did not think I would ever feel again." "What kinds of things?" "Hope, happiness, and something else, something I am not sure I am ready to name." She wrapped her arms around herself. "It scares me, Brock. It feels like a betrayal of Jacob." "Jacob wanted you to be happy," Brock said gently, moving closer. "He told me so himself. His last wish was for you to have a good life, a full life. That was why he made me promise to marry you. He knew I would take care of you, but I think he also hoped that maybe, eventually, we could be happy together." "Did he really?" He knew me better than anyone. He knew I was not the kind of man who could share a home with someone and not care about them. Brock reached out and carefully took her hand. I care about you, Naomi, more than I probably should given the circumstances, but I cannot help it. Naomi looked down at their joined hands. I care about you too. That is what scares me. It does not have to be scary. We can take this as slow as you need. What if I am not ready? What if I am never ready? Then we will stay the way we are, friends, partners. Whatever you need from me, that is what I will be. She looked up at him, tears glistening in her green eyes. How are you so patient? Because you are worth waiting for. The words hung in the air between them. Then, slowly, Naomi reached up and touched his face, her fingers soft against his cheek. Jacob chose well, she whispered. He knew exactly who to trust with me. Brock covered her hand with his own. I will never let you down, I promise. I know. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. I know you will not. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not pull away. Instead, she melted into his embrace, her arms coming up around his waist. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet barn with dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. It was not a declaration of love. It was not even a kiss. But it was a beginning. The weeks that followed were different. The wall between them came down brick by brick. They still slept in separate rooms, but their evenings were spent together, talking and laughing and sharing stories. Naomi told him about growing up on her father's ranch, about her mother's flower garden and her father's terrible singing voice. Brock told her about his childhood, about the lean years when his family had barely scraped by, about the mentors who had shaped him. They discovered they both loved reading, and Naomi began reading aloud to him in the evenings from her small collection of books. Brock found himself looking forward to those quiet hours, listening to her voice bring the stories to life. They also discovered they worked together seamlessly. Naomi anticipated what he needed before he asked, and he did the same for her. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts. The cattle were healthy and well-fed, the horses in top condition. When the first snow fell in November, they were ready for it. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Naomi reached up and removed her first wedding ring, the one Jacob had given her. She held it in her palm for a moment, tears rolling down her cheeks. I will always love him, she said quietly, but I think it is time to let him rest. You do not have to do that for me, Brock said. I am doing it for me, for us. She placed the ring in a small wooden box on the mantel. He is gone and I am still here. I think he would want me to live fully, not spend the rest of my life looking backward. Are you sure? No. But I am trying to be. She turned to him. Will you help me? Always. She moved closer, settling into the space beside him. It was the first time she had initiated physical closeness, and Brock's heart soared. He put his arm around her shoulders and she leaned against him, her head resting on his chest. Tell me something true, she said softly. What do you want to know? When did you start having feelings for me? Real feelings, not just duty. Brock thought back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment. The night of the storm. When you told me you felt like you were betraying Jacob by not being as miserable as you thought you should be. I realized then that I wanted to see you happy more than anything. That your happiness mattered to me more than my own. That is when you knew you loved me. It was the first time either of them had used that word. Brock's throat tightened. Yes, that is when I knew. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think I started falling for you when you carried me to bed that night. You were so gentle, so careful with me. No one had taken care of me like that since my parents died. I would take care of you every day for the rest of my life, if you would let me. She tilted her head up to look at him. I think I would like that. Yeah. She reached up and touched his face just as she had in the barn, but this time she did not stop there. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull back. He did not pull back. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. Naomi's lips were warm and tasted faintly of the tea she had been drinking. When they broke apart, she was smiling, really smiling for the first time since Jacob's death. "That was nice," she said shyly. "It was." Brock tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We can go slow, whatever you need." "I know, but maybe I do not want to go as slow as I thought." She kissed him again, more confidently this time. "Maybe I am ready to start living again." That night, Naomi did not retreat to her bedroom. They sat together on the sofa, kissing and talking and learning each other. It was not about passion or urgency. It was about connection, about two people finding their way to each other through grief and duty and unexpected love. When they finally did part ways to sleep, it was with the promise of more to come. Winter settled over the Dakota plains in earnest, bringing snow and bitter cold. Brock and Naomi worked together to keep the ranch running, breaking ice on the water troughs, making sure the animals had enough feed. On the worst days, when the wind howled and the temperature dropped below zero, they stayed inside, stoking the fire and keeping each other warm. Christmas came, their first as a truly married couple. They could not afford much, but Naomi made Brock a new shirt from fabric she had been saving, and Brock carved her a beautiful wooden box for her books. They exchanged gifts on Christmas morning, then attended services at the church in White River. Reverend Patterson smiled warmly when he saw them enter together, Naomi's hand tucked into Brock's arm. After the service, he pulled them aside. "I am glad to see you both looking so well," he said. "Marriage suits you." "Thank you, Reverend," Naomi said. "We are doing well. I can see that. There is a light in your eyes that was not there at the wedding." Patterson looked at Brock. "You have been good for her, son." "She has been good for me too," Brock said honestly. That night, as they lay together on the sofa, Naomi said, "I want you to move into the main bedroom. With me." Brock's heart skipped. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. We are married, Brock, really married now, not just on paper. I want to share everything with you. Is that all right?" "More than all right." He kissed her forehead. "I would like that very much." That night, for the first time, Brock slept in the main bedroom with Naomi curled against his side. It felt right in a way nothing else ever had. This was where he belonged. This was home. In the days that followed, their relationship deepened in every way. They learned each other's bodies and hearts, discovering new depths of intimacy and connection. Naomi bloomed under Brock's love and attention, her laughter becoming a regular sound in the house. Brock found himself happier than he had ever been, filled with a contentment he had not known was possible. One snowy evening in January, as they lay in bed, Naomi said, "I think I would like to have a baby." Brock propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "You do?" "I do. Jacob and I tried, but it never happened. I thought maybe I could not, but I would like to try again, with you." She reached up and touched his face. "I want to build a family with you, Brock, a real family." "I would love that." He kissed her softly. "More than anything." "Then let us try. Let us build the life Jacob wanted for me, but with you as my partner." "I will spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy," Brock promised. "You already do." February brought a thaw, and with it trouble. Sheriff Holcomb rode out to the ranch with news that the Garrett brothers had been spotted near Rapid City, asking questions about Brock and Naomi. "I wanted to warn you," Holcomb said, accepting a cup of coffee. "They might be planning something. Could be they are just talking, but I do not trust them." "We will be careful," Brock assured him. "Thank you for letting us know." After Holcomb left, Naomi looked worried. "What do you think they want?" "Probably trying to find a way to discredit our marriage or claim the land." Brock checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded and ready. "But they will not succeed. We have done everything legally. We are married and this ranch is ours." "I am scared, Brock. I know, but I will not let anything happen to you. I promise Jacob, and I promise you." 2 nights later, Brock woke to the sound of breaking glass. He was out of bed in an instant, grabbing his gun. "Naomi, get down," he hissed. She rolled out of bed and crouched beside it as Brock moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could see 3 figures moving around the barn. "The Garrett brothers. They are trying to set fire to the barn," Brock said grimly. He could see the flicker of flames starting to catch on the dry wood. "The horses are in there." Naomi started to stand, but Brock held her back. "You stay here. Bar the door behind me. If I am not back in 10 minutes, you take the rifle and hide in the root cellar. Understand?" "Brock, no, understand," she nodded, tears in her eyes. "Be careful." He kissed her hard and fast, then slipped out the bedroom window. The cold February night bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. His entire focus was on the barn, on the horses screaming in fear as smoke began to fill the building. Brock approached from the side, using the shadows for cover. Tom Garrett was pouring kerosene on the barn wall while Wade held a torch. Silas stood watch, a rifle in his hands. Brock took careful aim and fired. The bullet hit the ground near Wade's feet, causing him to jump and drop the torch. It fell into the snow and sputtered out. "Next one goes through your skull," Brock called out. "Step away from the barn." The 3 brothers spun toward his voice. Silas raised his rifle, but Brock was faster. He fired again, and Silas went down clutching his leg. "You bastard," Wade shouted, pulling his own gun. Brock dove behind the water trough as bullets slammed into it. He returned fire, forcing Wade and Tom to take cover. Inside the barn, the horses screamed louder. Brock knew he was running out of time. Then he heard a rifle shot from the house. Naomi stood on the porch, her rifle raised. "Get away from my home," she screamed, firing again. The distraction was enough. Brock rushed forward and slammed into Tom, knocking him to the ground. They grappled in the snow, punching and kicking. Tom was bigger, but Brock was fueled by rage and desperation. He got in a solid hit to Tom's temple, and the big man went limp. Wade had taken cover behind a wagon, trading shots with Naomi. Brock aimed carefully and fired. Wade jerked and fell, clutching his shoulder. "Enough," Brock roared. "It is over." Silas was moaning in the snow, his leg bleeding. Tom was unconscious. Wade looked up at Brock, his face twisted with pain and hatred, but he did not reach for his gun again. Brock rushed into the barn and threw open the stall doors. The horses bolted out into the night, terrified but alive. The fire had not spread far, thanks to the snow-dampened wood. Brock stomped it out, then dragged the Garrett brothers away from the building. Naomi ran to him, throwing her arms around him. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. You should have stayed inside. You needed help." She pulled back to look at him. "I could not just hide while you fought them alone." Sheriff Holcomb arrived an hour later with 2 deputies, having heard the gunshots from town. He took the Garrett brothers into custody, shaking his head at the sight of them. "Attempted arson, attempted murder, assault," he said, ticking off charges on his fingers. "They will be going away for a long time." "Good," Naomi said fiercely. As the sheriff loaded the brothers into his wagon, Wade looked back at Brock and Naomi. "This is not over," he spat. "Yes, it is," Brock said calmly. "You lost. Go to prison and think about what you have done." After the sheriff left, Brock and Naomi assessed the damage. The barn had some smoke damage and one wall would need replacing, but it could have been much worse. The horses were safe, scattered across the property but unharmed. "We should try to get some sleep," Brock said as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. "We have a long day ahead of us." But Naomi did not move toward the house. She stood looking at the barn, at the scorched wood, at the evidence of how close they had come to losing everything. "I could have lost you," she said softly. "If one of those bullets had found you, I would have lost you. You did not lose me. I am right here." She turned to him, and there were tears on her cheeks. "I love you, Brock Coleman. I should have said it before now, but I was afraid. But tonight taught me that life is too short for fear. I love you. With everything I am, I love you." The words crashed over Brock like a wave. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight he could feel her heart beating against his chest. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you for months. I was just waiting for you to be ready. I am ready, for all of it, for a life with you, for a family, for growing old together on this ranch." She pulled back to look up at him. "You are my husband in every way that matters. You are my partner, my protector, my love. I do not want to wait any more." "Then we will not wait." He kissed her, pouring every ounce of love and devotion he felt into that kiss. "We will build the life we both want, starting right now." The rest of winter passed in a blur of hard work and deeper love. They repaired the barn, rounded up the scattered horses, and began planning for spring. In March, Naomi discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear. What if something goes wrong? Naomi asked, her hand on her still flat stomach. "Then we will face it together," Brock said, "but I have a feeling everything is going to be just fine." He was right. Naomi's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and as her belly grew round with their child, she became even more beautiful in Brock's eyes. He found himself constantly touching her stomach, talking to the baby, planning for the future. Summer brought the hard work of haying and branding, but Brock insisted Naomi take it easy. She protested, but he was firm. "You are carrying our child. Let me do the heavy work. I am pregnant, not helpless." "I know, but humor me, please." She finally agreed, though she still insisted on helping with the lighter tasks. Brock hired a ranch hand, a young man named Peter, to help with the work. It was money they could barely spare, but Naomi's health was more important than anything. In September, a year and a day after Brock and Naomi's wedding, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, but when Brock heard the baby's first cry, every moment of fear and worry vanished. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant in Naomi's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Naomi looked down at their son with tears streaming down her face. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" Brock asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. Naomi looked up at him, and he saw the love shining in her green eyes. "Jacob." "We should name him Jacob, after the man who brought us together." Brock's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. Jacob Foster wanted me to have a good life, to have a family. He would want to be honored this way." She touched Brock's face. "You have given me everything he wished for me and more. Let us name our son after him." "Jacob Coleman," Brock said softly. "It is a good name." "The best name," Naomi agreed. Baby Jacob was a content child who rarely cried and seemed to smile at everything. Brock fell completely in love with his son, spending hours just watching him sleep or coo or wave his tiny fists. Naomi blossomed into motherhood, patient and loving and fierce in her protection of their child. As fall turned to winter, the Coleman family settled into their new life. The ranch continued to thrive, and they were able to pay off the bank loan entirely. They added more cattle, bought a breeding bull, and even started a small horse training business. On a cold December evening, as they sat by the fire with baby Jacob asleep in his cradle, Naomi said, "Do you ever think about how different our lives could have been?" "What do you mean?" "If Jacob had not asked you to marry me, if you had refused, or if I had sold the ranch instead. We never would have had this." She gestured around them. "This home, this family, this love. I think about it sometimes, Brock admitted. But then I remember that Jacob knew what he was doing. He knew us both well enough to see what we could not see ourselves. That we belonged together. Exactly. He gave us a gift, Naomi, a chance at happiness. All we had to do was be brave enough to accept it. Naomi moved closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. I am so glad we were brave. So am I. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn low. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, they were warm and safe and loved. Brock, Naomi said softly. Yes, thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for letting me love you. She kissed him, slow and sweet. Always. The years passed in a happy blur. Baby Jacob grew into a toddler, then a boy, learning to ride almost before he could walk, just as his father had predicted. The ranch prospered under Brock and Naomi's care, becoming one of the most successful in the region. They added 2 more children to their family. A daughter they named Sarah, with her mother's dark hair and green eyes, and another son they called Thomas, who had Brock's quiet determination. Brock and Naomi's love deepened with each passing year. They faced challenges together. Drought years and hard winters, sick cattle and broken equipment, the normal struggles of raising children and running a ranch. But they faced everything as a team, their bond growing stronger through both hardship and joy. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Brock took Naomi to the same church where they had married. They stood in the same spot where they had exchanged vows, but everything was different now. I want to renew our vows, Brock said. The first time we were strangers bound by duty. Now we are partners bound by love. I want to promise myself to you again, knowing what I know now. Reverend Patterson, now gray-haired but still spry, smiled as he performed the ceremony. Their 3 children sat in the front pew, Jacob holding baby Thomas while Sarah swung her feet and watched with wide eyes. Do you, Brock Coleman, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Patterson asked. I do, Brock said, his voice strong and sure. For the rest of my life and beyond, I do. And do you, Naomi Coleman, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Naomi said, tears of joy streaming down her face. With all my heart, I do. They kissed as husband and wife for the second time, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. There was only love. That evening, after the children were asleep, Brock and Naomi sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars come out. Naomi leaned against Brock's shoulder, her hand in his. You ever wonder what Jacob would think? She asked. Of all this of us. I think he would be happy, Brock said. I think he would see that his plan worked better than even he could have imagined. I like to think he is watching over us somehow, that he knows we honored his last wish and found something beautiful in the process. I believe that too. Brock kissed the top of her head. I believe he knows his family is safe and loved and happy. That was all he ever wanted. Naomi was quiet for a moment, then said, I want to tell you something I have never told anyone. What? The night before we married, I dreamed about Jacob. He came to me and told me that I was doing the right thing, that I should give you a chance. He said you were a better man than you knew, and that you would make me happy if I let you. She looked up at Brock. I did not tell you before because I thought it was just wishful thinking, my mind trying to make peace with what I was doing. But now I think it was real. I think he really did come to me one last time. Brock felt tears prick his eyes. I believe you, and I believe he was right. I have spent every day of the past 10 years trying to be worthy of you, of the trust he placed in me. You are worthy, Brock. You always have been. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and the horses in the barn nickered softly. It was the sound of their life, of the home they had built together. "I love you, Naomi Coleman," Brock said softly. "I love you too, Brock Coleman. Today, tomorrow, and always." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Jacob grew into a fine young man, thoughtful and kind like the uncle he was named for. Sarah became a teacher, just as Naomi had once wanted to be, opening a small school in White River. Thomas took to ranching like a duck to water, learning everything Brock could teach him about horses and cattle and the land. Brock and Naomi grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated 40 years of marriage surrounded by their children and grandchildren, a testament to the promise Brock had made to a dying man so long ago. On a spring evening not long after their 40th anniversary, Brock and Naomi sat on the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. Naomi's hand was in Brock's, their fingers intertwined as they always were. "You have any regrets?" Naomi asked. Brock thought for a long moment. "Only that I did not get to thank Jacob properly for what he gave us, for seeing what we could not see, for trusting me with the most precious thing in his life." "He knew," Naomi said softly. "He knew you would keep your promise, and he knew what would happen when you did. He gave us both a gift that day, Brock. He gave us each other. The best gift I ever received. Mine, too." As the sun set over the Dakota plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Brock pulled Naomi close. They sat together in the gathering twilight, two people who had been brought together by duty and found something far greater. They had found love. They had found home. They had found each other, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Their story became something of a legend in White River, passed down through generations. People spoke of the cowboy who kept his promise to a dying man and found his own heart in the process. They spoke of the widow who took a chance on duty and discovered love. They spoke of the ranch that thrived under the care of two people who learned that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings. But for Brock and Naomi, it was never about legend or story. It was about waking up each morning next to the person they loved, about building a life together one day at a time, about honoring a promise that had become so much more than obligation. It was about love, pure and simple and true. And as they sat together on that porch, watching another day end on the ranch they had built together, they knew with certainty that they would do it all again. Every hard choice, every difficult moment, every tear and every triumph. They would do it all again, because it had led them here, to this moment, to this life, to this love. The promise Brock had made to Jacob Foster in those desperate final moments had changed everything. It had brought two strangers together and given them a chance to build something beautiful. It had honored a dying man's last wish and created a legacy that would last for generations. But most importantly, it had given Brock and Naomi each other. And that, they both knew, was worth more than all the cattle and all the land in Dakota territory. As the stars came out and the night settled around them, Brock and Naomi remained on the porch, hand in hand, heart to heart, exactly where they were meant to be, together, always together. And somewhere, they liked to think, Jacob Foster smiled down on them, knowing that his last act of love had borne fruit beyond anything he could have imagined. He had given them a beginning, and they had turned it into a lifetime of love, a lifetime of partnership, a lifetime of keeping promises and finding hearts along the way. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.